Further debate. The member from Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker, and good morning. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to speak about important issues that affect my riding, and affordable housing and access to housing affect my riding a great deal. Today, we are debating Bill 7, the Promoting Affordable Housing Act. It's always got such a great Liberal title, and from my experience, any time the government tries to draw this much attention to the title of the bill, it's usually because there's important details that they would like us to overlook, or, as I've discovered, things that have been omitted. Like so many Liberal bills, Bill 7 looks okay on the surface, but many of the details are left to regulation, outside the legislature's control. Whether Bill 7 turns out to be a good thing or a bad thing will depend on these regulations. As I've said in this chamber many times before, the devil is always in the details. And with this government, we need to be especially vigilant when it comes to those details. So that is a concern with this bill. The government has introduced the legislation, but has said, don't worry about the rest, we've got it from here. So I still wish that we could trust the government to handle it, but sadly their track record is not exactly the best when it comes to putting the interests of Ontarians above their own. So we are concerned by what has been left to regulations. This includes the details on inclusionary zoning, which my colleagues and former members for the NDP have fought so hard for so many years. For example, there's no requirement or guideline suggesting that the provision of affordable housing should be permanent. The lack of such guidelines has become a problem in Ontario as multi-decade agreements expire and affordable housing is inevitably put at risk. It's nice to see that the government is finally listening to the NDP's long-standing call for inclusionary zoning, but glazing over details such as this is a dangerous and irresponsible approach. Rent protection, Speaker, is also missing from this bill. For example, the bill does not end the current system of two-tiered tenant rights, which exempts residences that were first occupied on or after November 1991 from rent increase guidelines. This is not fair. All tenants should have the same rights regardless of how old their building is, and all tenants should be protected from significant or prohibitive rent increases that could force them out of their homes. This bill also allows municipalities to give checks to people in need of housing instead of actual housing to people in need of housing. Speaker, this flexibility can be good for tenants in some contexts, but there are risks associated with it as well. By providing checks instead of guaranteed housing, there are no assurances that the amount provided will be enough to keep a roof over the recipient's head. There are also concerns that the money would simply flow into the pockets of landlords through rent increases. These are serious concerns, Speaker, and they can mean the difference between an increase or decrease in the availability of affordable housing in our communities. And these are not new ideas. They are not new concerns, and they are not the first time the NDP has said them. And sadly, Speaker, this is not the first time this Liberal government has overlooked these concerns. They promised to eliminate They made promises about real rent control prior to the 2003 election and have been breaking this promise for over 13 years. Now they are continuing to break promises with Bill 7. It all comes back to the same concern, Speaker. Bill 7 looks okay on the surface, but there are so many details overlooked and so many decisions left to regulations and away from public scrutiny. The government has also made a number of assumptions with this bill. It seems that the government has assumed that with this bill, the market alone can provide affordable housing for Ontarians. It assumes that by clearing away a few regulations and changing some bylaws, the private sector will magically start building lots of affordable housing. It sounds great, Speaker. And in a perfect world, that would be the case, and we could rely on that being the case, but this isn't a perfect world. And this isn't a small concern. This means rolling the dice on ensuring that families across Ontario can afford a home to live in. And that is not something to roll the dice on. The NDP does want the removal of regulatory barriers to affordable housing, but the market alone will not solve the affordable housing issue. The federal and provincial governments will need to step up with more funding to get affordable housing built. Unfortunately, Ontarians are still suffering the effects of federal Liberal cuts to housing in the 1990s and provincial downloads by the PCs. And this is not just a product of the past or a problem of the past. Provincial funding for housing and homelessness prevention has been cut even further in recent years, including a $20 million cut to the Housing Ministry's budget this year. So, Speaker, as you can see, there are a number of issues with this bill. We are pleased to see the government finally listening to the call for change. But there are areas where it falls short, and there are areas where we simply don't know where it falls because the government has left so much up to regulation. And the important thing to note here is that these decisions have a real impact on communities across Ontario. By glazing over some of these concerns, the government could be hurting families in need of affordable housing. And this problem is prevalent in so many communities, including my own. The current waitlist for rent-geared-to-income housing in Durham region, so not just my riding, but in the Durham region, stands at around 5,700 households. It's a lot of people. The Housing Services Division in Durham region does excellent work in our community, but as this government knows, they're simply not provided the support they need to achieve their goals. In 2014, the region of Durham approved an ambitious 10-year housing and homelessness strategy called At Home in Durham. The strategy focuses on 4 key goals: end homelessness in Durham, secure affordable rent for everyone, provide greater housing choice, and ensure strong and vibrant neighbourhoods. As I said, Speaker, these are ambitious goals, and I am very proud that our region is fighting them head-on. And they have seen some success already. In Durham, 2015 saw a 7% decrease in the usage of emergency shelters from the year before. But they've also recognized the challenges that they face as well. At the time of the study, the average market rent in Durham was $1,021. Assuming that we follow the rule that no family should have to spend more than 30% of their income on rent, then you would need a minimum income of $40,000, well, almost $41,000 to afford that rate. Unfortunately, Speaker, 1 in 5 households in Durham earn less than that amount. To quote directly from the report, Speaker, quote, At Home in Durham recognizes that affordable housing is vital to strong and vibrant communities and commits to working in partnership with the non-profit and private housing sectors to increase affordable housing options for low and moderate income households. It also recognizes the need for increased rental assistance for low-income households who struggle with more severe affordability needs. People with low to moderate income face increasing challenges in finding affordable rental housing in Durham. Although the region's social housing portfolio ensures a level of affordability for some of the most vulnerable people in our community, including seniors, people with disabilities and families in crisis, only about 300 subsidized units become available annually. In order to address the affordability needs of all renters in Durham with low to moderate income, the community needs a greater range of affordable rental housing options. Speaker, you can see that ultimately the region will require real support from the province to ensure that these important goals are achieved. And we must remember the problem does not simply end there. As I have discussed during past opportunities to speak in this chamber, affordable housing is about more than rent or a mortgage. It's about the expenses necessary to keep it running, to keep it warm, to keep the lights on, to keep food on the table. People need costs such as their hydro to be stable and fair so they can budget what little they might have to keep up with the cost of living underneath a roof. In Durham, the average wait time for housing is nearly 4 years for non-senior singles and couples. Seniors wait just over 4 years. So while we appreciate on paper what the government has put forward with this bill, we need to see action behind it. We need to see the details that will truly decide the effectiveness of this bill, and we need to see the resources that will be necessary to make real change happen. Investments in affordable housing can make a real difference in people's lives, and the ripple effects can be massive. So I ask that this government take the time to speak with the experts and community groups that understand the challenges our province faces, listen to their suggestions, make real investments in affordable housing in Ontario. Everyone in Ontario deserves to live with a stable and secure roof over their head and be able to put food on the table. Thank you, Speaker.